One of the things that the Society of Actuaries, and I think the CIA as well as the casualty folks did last year, was they put out a call for financial essays. And there were right around 40 of them, and one of them, there was a topic that I'd been kind of running through and trying to figure out how I was going to write it up, and that kind of gave me the impetus to go out and write it up. But it was talking about skepticism and challenging ideas, challenging models, challenging just everything, the ability to challenge, encouraging risk culture, encouraging people to challenge. And so I wrote a paper, a couple-page paper, and I want to thank you guys. I've had more hits to my website in the last 2 weeks coming from Kitchener and Waterloo than I've had for a while. I go out and look every couple days, and it's kind of neat to watch, because other talks I've given, will have like 1 or 2 hits, somebody going out and looking at something. This one, I bet there's been 40 hits. And I know they weren't all hairy. So but the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's important to be skeptical. The paper that I wrote actually was titled, "Should you have a chief skeptical officer in your company?" You're kind of a tongue-in-cheek one. But as we went through it, as I wrote it, I started abbreviating it CSO, and at the very end of the paper I go, well, what else could CSO mean? It could mean a common sense officer. And that's really what we're talking about, is having someone who, and not just one person, encouraging staff and other people to be consistent about being willing, able, and qualified to challenge ideas, brainstorm, do things like that. Now, this is a group that will actually get this joke, that Brownian motion does not define the financial markets. You guys get that, right? The practicing actuaries that I gave a similar talk, and I had that line in there, and they all just kind of looked at me. Which, now one thing, not to put you guys in competition with the University of Nebraska actuarial program, but when I gave a talk for them last year, they actually had a t-shirt that they gave me that was a guy running that was a brownie. And they were talking about Brownian motion in there. So we had some fun with that. But it is important. I mean, we use the models from the physical sciences to approximate, to proxy the financial markets. They are not driving the financial markets. And Mary and I have had a number of these talks about, she's got some really good models now, but she'll say, if I think of something better next week, I'm throwing that one away and using the new one. And that's exactly what we should be doing, is always looking for something that's a little bit better. Okay, this is interaction time. So I apologize for those on the internet right now, because you can raise your hands, but I can't see them. Okay, you are an institution. Okay, I am going to offer you 2 sets of returns. Okay, this is, let's say it's 100 scenarios, and both the scales are the same. The side on the left we'll call A, the side on the right we'll call B. Who would rather have this set of very volatile scenarios versus B, this set of very, very stable scenarios? Who would vote for B? You have to vote. We only have an hour. Would anyone vote for B? Would anyone vote for A? Quite a few. Have you guys seen me give this talk before? What we run into, and it's interesting that students would not fall for it as much. Practitioners, what I find is that they look at this and they say, wow, look how stable that is. That's great. That's on side B. What they miss is that side A, in every case, the dollars are higher. So do I want something stable and lower, or do I want more money? Okay, now, this is your money. Which one of these do you want? Who wants A? Everybody wants A. It's interesting because what I found is that people think differently if they're working at a company much more interested in those stable returns because they won't get in trouble. But when you're talking about your own money, I want more. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of those things to be aware of, though, that when we look at just standard deviation or just some one single metric, that we fall into traps. I'm going to skip over this slide real quickly because I'm assuming that, Mary, you're covering CTE and VAR and all those things. Everybody understand those? Okay. Don't forget your Pythagorean theorem. Just because you can do it with a formula, you can do it geometrically too. And the higher up you go in a company, the easier it is to explain these are about the same length rather than having a report of 20 pages to explain that same thing. So sometimes you can do things graphically easier. Economic capital models. You guys are probably actually better versed on these than I am. This is a slide that I've had in there for several years, and it's intriguing to me watching what's happened in the last year, because probably since 2005 I've had in here, risks. These assumptions are being challenged. Risks are independent. Correlation is constant. Model risk is minimal. It's important to challenge all those things and to be aware of it. And I know you guys in your classes are I'm sure doing that. There's a lot of discussion right now in financial services industry about whether we should be doing principles-based approaches or rules-based approaches. Canadian financial services has already moved more towards a principles-based approach. The United States has been trying to. I've now given up on that attempt. They don't even want to use stochastic interest rate scenarios anymore. So they're now, I'm officially labeling them as rules-based going forward. But were they to do it correctly, they would use the same tools. The point I'm trying to make here is that you can leverage stuff. If you're working on something for regulatory purposes, it should be the same models that you're using to manage the business internally. You can look at those stochastic results, looking at the whole graph, not just looking at statistics that come out of it, picking levels of conservatism, using cash flows instead of accounting metrics, and having consistency between before the product's sold, while the product's sold, and reporting what the product is sold. There's some practical uses of these models. Most of them are fairly obvious. Internal growth or organic growth, aging the current portfolio. Some people would call that DCAD or cash flow testing. Introducing a new product. The idea is looking at the marginal impact of introducing a new product. Too many companies will make a decision based on whether to introduce a new product with one model, and then when they go to put in their projections for the following year's sales, they start over. You should be taking that model that you used to make the decision and put it into then your reporting process.